welcome to the Unmuted podcast, where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech. My name is Jeff. I'm the founder of Scale HR and your podcast host. We have been dropping new episodes on a weekly basis, and all of our episodes live on our YouTube channel and on our website at GoScaleHR.com. And so this is actually a really cool topic, and it's called Scaling at Speed, Thriving in the Fast Lane of Organizational Growth. So there's a lot there, but you know what? It's been really interesting because there's been a lot of growth, obviously, in the tech sector over the last maybe 10, 15 years. And then I think things have really drastically changed in the last maybe couple of years since the pandemic started. And so we're going to bring in our guest, Penny, shortly. Before we do, I just want to talk about a couple of things because this is a really important area of business. HR, obviously, that's the forefront of, leading this. And so I wanted to start by talking about the difference between growth and scaling. And I know that sometimes, can be a little bit confusing for a lot of people, but think of it this way. Growth is all about you're basically adding, resources for the goal of actually generating revenue. And so you're spending a lot of money, you're hiring a lot, you're investing in new software. The idea is to spend to grow, okay? And then you get to a point where you can't keep doing that, because it starts to get, really expensive. And then at some point, you shift into a scaling mode. And so what that really means is you're generating more revenue, but you're not spending more in terms of resources to generate that revenue. So the revenue starts to go like this, the cost do not keep up to that. So that so that's where the profit comes in. And so all companies go through that process at some point. But what's really interesting is your org strategy changes. And I don't know if the HR industry as a whole really understands at what point you shift from growth strategy to scaling strategies. And so, Penny's going to help us, unpack that. And I did mention within the tech sector, obviously, there's been a lot of rapid growth and scaling up over the years. But it seems like these days, in the last couple of years, that perceived fluidity is over. Investments are not flowing as they once did. There's always been a challenge with tech talent, supply chains, and so forth, health challenges, financial challenges. We're actually dealing with things like inflation for the first time in probably 30 years. It hadn't been easy, obviously with the global impact, and I think really has had a bit of a negative effect on our operations, and I think that has changed how we approach organizations in HR and people and talent. So there's a lot to talk about here, a lot to unpack, and I'm going to bring in Penny. Farinha has been a long-time contact of mine. She's currently the, I'm going to bring her in and she can tell you what she does. So Penny, I want to welcome you to the Unmuted podcast. So thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
So before we dive into our topic, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do, your background?
Sure thing. So today I'm VP of HR, so all things people at ecobee. ecobee, we are a Canadian-based company. We have about 650 employees, 3 different countries that we operate in, and we're in the connected home space. So we make all these fun devices in your house when it comes to like thermostats, doorbell cameras, indoor cameras, you name it.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm not a customer of the company, but my brother-in-law is, and he loves it. ecobee product. So that's a bit of a thumbs up there. So let's just really dive right in. So as I mentioned in my opening comments, the lines are blurred between when an organization is in high growth mode versus when they're focusing on scaling. So how do you know when you need to shift your strategy and approach from high growth to scale up?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And I couldn't agree more that I do think that those two terms often get blurred or treated almost the same. I'd say all the obvious things that it's like, that moment would be like, business needs, how well the product is doing, the success. A big part is like competition in the market. So it's like,
Yeah.
are you at the point where you feel that you've grown and also that you have, the people in place in the certain areas to be able to kind of take you to that scaling level? In a funny way, it's like, I think at times you don't necessarily know that you're like in that transition moment
Mm.
until you've like maybe crossed there a little bit, or crossed over. So yeah, I would say, kind of all of those things. There is this like eagerness probably to like get to the other side and get to this like, scale mode. But I couldn't stress more that it's like you have to make sure that you have the right people and you're ready to go to that next level, because it doesn't become like this nice smooth path. It gets also really, really hard. And I think that that is like a breaking point for a lot of companies, where the way that they used to do things, they're going to have to, change. And it's like, do you have the right people around you to really, make that come to be in the end in a scaling organization?
So obviously you worked in both scenarios, high growth, but also, rapid scale up type organizations. So from your vantage point as an HR leader, what have you learned about being right in the thick of it all? I mean, there's probably been maybe just a couple of the top things that you've experienced and learned
Yeah.
during your career.
I'd say one thing is it's like, there's no playbook. There's no
Yeah.
nice, like, this is what should do. And then therefore this happens. There's definitely like aspiration, or, you can seek, other companies that have done something similar. But I'd also say that it's like, you have to really understand the needs of your organization, people, how you can adapt it. So yeah, I always say like have a North Star, but know that it might kind of, ebb and flow along the way. And
Yeah.
I couldn't stress more that it's like, you have to be nimble. You have to be knowing that things are going to change. There's this like big theme lately. I keep hearing adaptable change, everywhere. That it's like this thought that, you might have this great concept and you're like, this is where it's going to land and this is what it's going to take me. But there's all these other, variables that people, cannot predict. And it's like, how well, the business is doing, specific employees, do they stay with you? Do they leave? What is the impact? So yeah, I'd say, yeah, know that it's not a clear line. And if anyone says that they have some sort of like defined playbook, it maybe worked once for them, but know that you can't necessarily take that and, apply it in like a
Yeah.
same way where you are.
That's actually really interesting because I was just thinking back on my career, and I built, HR strategies more than I can count. And I don't think any one strategy has ever materialized fully.
Yeah.
If based on what I planned for at a certain point in time, and I always knew, that it was going to change. I mean, obviously, having something is better than nothing, right? So, because I mean, it's obviously a roadmap forward, so you're actually focused. But things always change, and I've always told people that. And I think it's really interesting that you said, be flexible and nimble. I think that is a really key point. So in the last couple of years, obviously, we are sort of 4 years, almost 4 years, no, over 4 years past the start of the pandemic. So as I mentioned earlier, things have changed. We have tightening of financial markets, inflation, global supply chains, and on and on and on. So has your perspective changed about all of what we talked about, during these past few years?
Absolutely. I think that
Okay.
it's like even in like the last like 5 years, it's dramatically changed. So it's like, the world around us, I'd say like people's expectations from an employer is very different than probably when me and you, started out in our career. So I'd say that kind of like coupled with the fact of like, the economy, it's been bumping along not so great the last little while. And it's like to go through, a massive, kind of like growth phase of a company, I'd say while it's still very exciting, I think there's still just like a lot of like cautious folks out there. And I'd also say, like, from an HR standpoint, I actually think it makes the job really interesting. I don't think that there's probably been this much change in the HR field in several years. So if anything, I think it kind of like creates this like new avenue of like how HR can like, refocus and kind of like shift what, HR was even doing like 10 years ago. If anything, I think if you're up for like a good, challenging, complex job, it's like HR today is probably like way different than it was when we started.
I think that is an understatement. So, yeah, it's obviously as sort of, all of us, no matter how long we've been working in work, we have, people around us, that are advisors, mentors, and so on. And so, given that there's been so much turmoil and change, during the past 4 years, what and who do you lean on for guidance when you're, trying to transition from a growth mode to a scale up mode? Is there some sort of source of inspiration to keep going? What is it for you?
Yeah, that's another really great question. I'd answer it in two different ways. So I'd say like go and seek people that you want to bring in your life to lean on either for, inspiration, answers, or even just sometimes empathy for the situation that you're
Yeah.
in. I challenged myself a few years ago, this is several years ago, to be like, you know what? I'm going to look up folks that I find inspiring in the Toronto tech scene on LinkedIn, and I'm going to send them a message. And maybe they'll reply and maybe they won't. Like 99% of the people replied. And it was interesting because it's like, I think they were also looking for that same connection. So it was like finding someone that you're like, hey, they're doing something interesting, tap them on the shoulder. And it's kind of like a meeting of the minds where it's like,
Yeah.
sharing stories. It's not necessarily like, one or both of you had the answer, but it's like the creating community feel, I think is really, really important. The other part I'd say is look for inspiration for people that might not necessarily be in like the same type of job as you. So I think of someone that I met like years ago, and he came into a company that I worked at, and he was a CFO, and he was like heading off into his retirement years, but he'd scaled all these like very successful companies, and some of them like weren't even tech companies. But what stood out was he had went through all these periods of like I'd say like pretty intense change. Um, Ended up literally just one day like tapping him on the shoulder and being like, "Hey, let's talk." It's been probably like 10 years, and I still talk to him. I still lean on him all the time.
Yeah.
I reach out to him, and I think that having those type of connections that aren't necessarily in the exact same job or in the exact same department that you're in is really, really informative. So it's like, he's helped me really take, a more business approach. And it's like, how do you position yourself as an HR leader at like with more of a business focus? So yeah, I'd say like go and seek out those people. Because yeah, just like my first example, it's like they're readily out there and they're also like, you know, quite eager for partaking their wisdom.
And I think that fantastic advice, because there are so many people out there that may not be working in HR, but they have a different vantage point,
Yeah.
and they're still working in an organization. So their main objectives from a company perspective are still the same as yours. It's just sort of their perspective and their thinking pattern might be different, which is a good thing, because that gives you that laneway, I guess, to sort of understand other points of views that you wouldn't maybe not have thought about. I mean, HR has probably the most touch point across the business than any other business function. So why wouldn't you do it? I mean, it's sort of a no-brainer. But so that's a really interesting point. But I want to shift gear just very quickly about as we were planning out this episode, we were talking a bit about the different skill sets and mindset that are needed for the HR team. So when you're going through high growth versus scale, rapid scale. And obviously the key skill sets are similar, but there are many differences. And so I'm wondering, what do you look for when you're hiring someone for an organization that is shifting or transitioning from a rapid growth focus to more, sort of a scale up focus?
Yeah. This is huge. And I would say like ecobee is an interesting example because I've been here for 8 years. So it's like ecobee 8 years ago was a very different company than ecobee is today. So I'd say like, the type of person that we're looking for, that like scrappy startup person, well, those are all great skills to have. That's not really the skill that is going to help us go to the next level. So, it's in the beginning, like, as you were saying, the difference between growth and scale. Now we're looking for the model of how has this employee been able to like scale in an organization. So again, I think it comes back to, it's like, can that person show the ability to change, the ability, to flex and grow, learn, you're not going to necessarily have all the answers, coming into the position. So I'm not saying that, now we're trying to hire people that have maybe been at like large organizations, but I'd say someone that can prove that, they can take the learnings along the way and flex and really, I guess what really is the word? I think it comes back to this like adaptable change part where it's like, know the scenario that you're in, know how you want to, learn from it and how you're going to grow. Many of the things that I outlined weren't like these like hard skills. They're like soft skills. So you need to be able to like, even like change how you're interviewing people and the profiles that you're looking for. Yeah, I'd say those are the biggest things for us.
Fantastic. So if there's one thing that you want people to take away from this episode, what is that one thing?
Oh, I think I've said it. Adaptable change is the answer.
Okay. So I think that's probably been a pretty consistent one from the last 30 or 40 years. I guess. I mean, I don't know, but that's definitely I would agree with that. I mean, if you're not open to look, you don't have to love change, but you have to be able to work with it and sort of deal with it. And if you can't, then obviously being part of an organization that's going through it is probably not the best place for you. But I think everyone today, needs to be, pretty, adaptable to change. So, Penny, I want to thank you for being here. It's always great having you on the Unmuted podcast. And so, like I said, earlier, going through growth, high growth versus rapid scale up, while they are similar, they are a little bit different. And of course, during the last couple of years, there's been a lot of, turmoil in the industry due to several reasons. So obviously, HR needs to take a very smart, strategic approach to how they run the function to support the organization. And so, really, if there's anything that you can do is that you can be, adaptable to change and be curious and ask questions. And so these podcast episodes live on our website, GoScaleHR.com, also on our YouTube channel. Please hit the like button, add your comment, subscribe to our channel too, so then you get a notification of our latest episode. And so thank you for being here, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
Audio Jungle.